Hey everybody, it's Emorja, and today is our second episode of Black at ND. And today's special guest for our topic of campus policing is Chief Keri K. Shibata. Chief Keri K., how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you, Emorja?
I'm doing pretty good. Just adjusting to the times as we all are, but things are going good.
Good.
So let's just sort of get into it. Right now with the way that our climate is set up, first the world shut down by the pandemic, and then we had no choice but to look at George Floyd. There was no turning away from that. And so even after George Floyd, there's still Breonna Taylor, there's been Ahmaud Arbery, and even somebody today, I can't recall his name at the moment, but somebody in Wisconsin. So these things are still ongoing, no matter how loud we cry. There's still somebody out there who wants to turn a deaf ear. But needless to say, on this show today, I really want to discuss a lot of misnomers and dispel those things as it relates to, race relations, how we can build it on our campus, but also even in our community of South Bend. But before we even get into any of that, what is a normal day like for the chief of police at Indy?
Well, there's pre-COVID and now, so.
Right. True.
So a normal day before COVID was lots of meetings.
Okay.
So sometimes it feels like my life is one big meeting. So whether it be like our internal staff meetings or meetings with campus partners, either regular meetings or meetings about event planning or strategic planning meetings, things like that. So yes, a lot of meetings. Also trying to make sure that I'm connected with our team so that they have access to me for asking questions or getting guidance or whatever, and just so that we have good communication and everyone knows what's going on. So I will also spend time trying to be in touch with them, and also sometimes getting out on patrol with them as well.
Yeah.
During COVID, I also the Department of Emergency Management, the Director of Emergency Management also reports to me. And so a lot of when we went into the shutdown and then came back out of it, a lot of that was handled by not just us, but a whole network of people around the university under our emergency management structure. Mm-hmm. And so it has now transitioned away from the emergency management structure into the new structures that the university has put in place. But we're still very, very involved in the COVID response unit, in the testing site, the quarantine and isolation, and the call center and the teams that are supporting folks in quarantine and isolation.
And the vision for Ndpd, what is the vision?
Yeah, so the vision is we want to be a progressive and professional police department that is uniquely Notre Dame, that is driven by the university's mission and values, and that we hold ourselves accountable to those things in everything. Yeah. We want to be collaborative and supportive. So working with campus partners, and that's, I think, something that's unique to campus law enforcement, that we're very fortunate that there are a lot of partners and resources that are available that might not be available to a municipal department. So, for example, when we have a student having a mental health crisis, there's a lot of conversation about should that be the police dealing with that or not. And here we have always taken a collaborative approach where either we are having hall staff or a counselor with us, or at least on the phone with us and that student, so that it's not just us handling that situation. So we see ourselves as community caretakers. And I like to say that, yes, we have the authority to enforce the laws of the state of Indiana, but we see that as a tool, not as the core thing that we do. It's a tool that we can use if we have to use it to make sure that the campus is safe. But we always want to take the most supportive and lowest level of intervention that's needed to make sure campus and individuals are safe.
Gotcha. And because I don't know what that means, what is the lowest level of intervention?
So the lowest level of intervention would just be a contact with a person. I
Okay.
suppose that there are times we also are involved in the campus threat assessment and management team. So
Okay.
there are times when we have a threat assessment case where we don't think that we need to actually have a conversation or an interaction with someone, where we can gather information on the periphery and get enough to understand what if any steps should be taken.
Cops, not even just on Notre Dame's campus, but just in general, will forego the steps and just go to the highest step. For example, something that could be that we could, as a civilian, see as like a petty crime. Some officers may escalate it from that small thing to being arrested. Do you believe that like that has happened, or things that you know of that has happened similar to that?
Sure. Absolutely. I definitely think that happens sometimes. Hopefully it's not most of the time, and we watch that very closely, and I don't think that happens often, if at all, here.
Cool. That's good. And so as we're building diversity on campus, you're the first female chief of police. What are some cultural things, or what officers are involved in other cultural events that will help them, well, I guess outside of their own, that will help them grow and know how to, communicate with other other ethnicities, excuse me?
Yeah. So we have a great relation. Our department has a great relationship with Eric Love, who is the staff diversity and inclusion officer. So our officers participate in, certainly they all go through the We Are All ND training with other faculty and staff. Whenever Eric has an event that he is hosting, I send that out to all of our staff, and many of them choose to attend those events that his office hosts. We also have, for a number of years, had regular contact with the Student Diversity Council. And so have always I have done regular check-ins with them on how things are going, and are there things they're experiencing or seeing or hearing that we can help address, whether it be with our department or others. And then have always extended to them the invitation that if there's ever an event that they're hosting that they would like our participation in whatever way they would like, we'd be happy to do that. And then we're working on, with the umbrella clubs for the student cultural clubs, we're working on hosting unity summits with our officers and each different club. And we're still working out the details of is it one individual club, or is it the umbrella clubs that we do that with. But I'm in conversations with the leaders of those clubs right now to get that scheduled. And we'll also offer that to the employee resource groups for faculty and staff.
And I'm glad you said that, because there's, as it relates to, I'm sort of this will tie in together. I know personally that there has been one person who has submitted a complaint or report to Ndpd regarding the situation on campus with racial profiling. And whenever I spoke to this individual, it was told to me that after she had submitted it, there was a long time before somebody actually got back to her. And as a graduate student, one thing that she brought to my attention is that the graduate students and the undergraduate students have the same system. For example, whereas the graduate student may teach, they're earning their livelihood and they're also earning a degree, they are not graded and for this case, they're still graded, or their complaints are sent down the same tunnel, when in fact ours should be weighed more. And my question is, do you believe that there is a way that we could have special attention, where we could separate the graduates from the undergraduates, or have the graduate students also in line with the faculty and staff? Because in a sense, it's like we are.
So for the complaint process, if there is a complaint of either sexual or discriminatory harassment, or some policy violation related to sexual or discriminatory harassment, those complaints get reported to the Office of Institutional Equity. So when I hear of a complaint and I think this seems like it could be bias or discriminatory harassment on the part of an officer, or or some sexual harassment or bias that way, then we refer that to the Office of Institutional Equity. So I think most likely the process that you're talking about is theirs, and I really can't speak to whether or not it could be separated out with grad students. What I would say is, so we would also do an internal investigation to see if any of our policies had been violated, and that should happen rather quickly. And we don't get a lot of complaints, so that shouldn't get bogged down. But the way our process works is there are a number of ways people can report, and I really want people to report if they have an interaction that concerns them, because I want to be able to address it if we have a problem, and we certainly have done that. And I also, or to at least have the opportunity to, if there wasn't a problem, but the person thinks that there was because they don't understand the whole situation, for me to be able to explain to them the whole situation, and maybe they feel a little bit better about it.
Gotcha. Because even out of that, there's a lot of, and I'm glad you explained that, because I didn't know all of that. And I'll say that because the individual, she filed a complaint once before, and it didn't get seen about till later. Then there was somebody who happened to be, there was a white girl who submitted a complaint who was in her class, and who ended up getting a faster response. So when I was speaking to this individual, she was saying, well, maybe after so long and after submitting so many complaints, that it seemed as if Ndpd or the department that the complaint got sent to turned a deaf ear. And it's like, oh, okay, well, this is just, a regular person. We see their name all the time. And I don't know what it's like on the inside, but I can say on the outside, I could see where she was coming from. And then I can also, now that you've sort of explained the hierarchy to me, I can see where there could be some miscommunication there as well too. So the other question is, whenever we have these complaints that we submit, what is the length of time that we should expect, to get a response from somebody?
If it's reported to the police department, I would expect that you would get a response within 24 to 48 hours.
So I want to pivot a little bit to what you and I were discussing yesterday and today about the video. And of course, you and I, we've shared dialogue about this. Could you explain the incident that happened in December 2018?
Sure. So there was an incident that happened where there was a verbal altercation, a serious verbal altercation between two employees at an event, and I want to be careful not to try to.
I understand. No, I understand.
So there's a verbal altercation. Someone working the event, one of the managers working the event, called our department. Officers responded. One went to the event space itself to talk with the manager who called and other employees that were involved, and had then learned that one of the people involved in the verbal altercation had left the area. They were given that person's name, which I'm not going to talk about any names, and went to look for. So the manager said that they were concerned that this person might be waiting around to either outside or somewhere in the area, but not the immediate area, to try to confront or even physically engage with other people who were involved. Right. So our officers went to see if that person was still around or not. They had a name and a very vague description, and encountered a person. And I also say that the person, so there was the officer who was at the scene talking to the manager, and then there's another officer outside. The officer outside gets part of the description, but not all of it. And then sees someone that may fit that description wearing the same clothes, because it was a uniform. So, wearing the same clothes, same race, same gender, and confronted that person. Had the name, that person that they confronted, to see if they were, and then they explained what they were trying to do is see if they're this person or not.
Yeah.
And as the interaction started, the person that they were talking to at first wouldn't answer questions at all, just sat silently and wouldn't answer questions. And then when the second officer, who had been the one that went upstairs, came to the event, and started to engage with the person, he did start to answer questions and said what his name was, and it was not the same name, but both names, both first and last names of both the person they were looking for and the person they were talking with started with the same letters. And because the person had at first refused to engage or identify, and then didn't have an ID to verify that was him, they thought he might be giving a false name, so they wanted to make sure that they verified that it was indeed him, the person that he was saying he was. And so that person, I'm sure, did not know all the other things that were going on, although the officers tried to explain that they were called for a reason, and this is the person they're looking for, and if he was able to, verify that this is his identity, they would immediately let him go, and that's what they were wanting to accomplish. So eventually, one of the managers came down and verified, no, that's not the person. That is the person's name, and then he was allowed to leave. And I think there was certainly stress on both sides of that interaction. With the person was doing a Facebook Live, which is well within his rights to do, but that does add stress to an officer. And then when a person doesn't respond or provide the information that they're asking for, that makes it challenging as well. And I think both officers and the individual they stopped could have done things a little bit differently that would have made it a more positive experience. I'm sure being stopped by the police is never a positive experience. Well, I hope there are times when it is, because we do want to be engaging at times when there's not something that we're investigating as well. But in this instance, I think it could have gone better if on both sides of the interaction, things had been handled a little bit differently.
I got you. And after looking at the video, I did see where the young man, I do see that he could have responded differently, but I also do understand that in that situation, I don't know if that's ever happened to him before, because I do recall in the video where the officer, called him out of his name. And so I know that probably added, more fuel to the fire. And I'm pretty sure, of course, there is a portion of the video that we did not see. In regards to what happened before that. And right now in the world we live in, it's like if you don't have any proof, then everyone's usually going to take the officer's side, because I know for so many cases we've been looking at, so what about the officers? Are they going to be recording it, using their camera? And I do understand that there are certain steps you have to take, but I do believe that it could have been handled different overall. So I'll say this. So in the work with you as a police officer in diversity training, do you all ever understand the history of Black men? And whenever you ask for paperwork and ID, how that may set off an unfortunate chain of events, like for example in Black families, and how that question can escalate a situation?
So we, in our training that we have done, that we have conducted by the department, I don't think that we specifically have gone into a lot of that history. Although I bring it up when, we're in a series of conversations right now with a number of people in our department about, we're reading a different material, much of which does include history and a number of the different kinds of events that we go to that comes out either through conversations or through prompts that are shared. And so it is something that I am trying to help our department understand, but it has not necessarily been a part of so we do training on it's called fair and impartial policing on implicit bias. That's one of the trainings that we require for our staff, and that's not specifically in there for that training or for some of the trainings that they've gone through with Eric Love and his team. Yeah. So the answer is yes and no. We're trying to expose our staff, and I have conversations with them to help them understand how it does feel to someone. Not that I necessarily know that, but I've heard that from people and try to help them understand that. And actually, we're developing a training on trauma-informed policing with a psychologist from Valparaiso, who's actually a Notre Dame grad. Yeah, so she and I are working on a trauma-informed policing training, because I think that that the Black community and other communities of color or people from other countries have experienced trauma. Some individually certainly have, and others as a community. There's this community trauma that has happened at the hands of law enforcement, and so whenever police officers are engaging with someone, and they may or may not know, most likely they will not know that person has either themselves or their community or family have experienced trauma, and they don't understand the reaction if they're not anticipating that. So we're working on a training to train our officers on that, both for recognizing in the person they're interacting with what might be a trauma response, and also for themselves, because they've experienced trauma, and either in their job or in their personal lives, or so we want them to understand it from both sides and to be able to engage with people in a trauma-informed way.
Yeah, and even with understanding, both sides, in most cases, we usually never have the chance to even explain. We usually are probably dead on arrival, or we're somewhere with many wounds in our body because we have never had the chance to explain. I mean, I can't ignore the fact, like, for example, there have been several situations, with cops where, the white guy would get off easily, specifically speaking with Dylan Roof. This guy, went to a church, killed 9 people, and the police officer took him to Burger King to get something to eat. And, we look at, George Zimmerman, and then we look at, of course, what happened today. We look at the cops, who killed Breonna Taylor. We look at, the cops who killed George Floyd. And we live these situations. And I know that, with I'm glad you and I are having this conversation, because I do believe that in order for us to get some kind of understanding, we're going to have to tap into those areas that are very uncomfortable. And I think sometimes officers and people like myself, sometimes are afraid to share. But in 2020, at this point, I think everybody is speaking out. I'm even seeing more people I'm even seeing more white people and people who are Hispanic, as allies for Black lives, because we see that we have a target on our back and on our chest because of the color of our skin. And so for that, even outside of the Notre Dame bubble, just even in South Bend, on the other side of the town, there are still those same situations that are happening. And right now, building those relations with cops, trying to build those relationships with people who are out there to protect us, is something that's very important. But we also, I'll say that Ndpd also has to understand that although when it comes down to stories that one may think could be incorrect, we're trying to tell you our truths. And, we've been crying this truth for so long. And like I was talking on the interview last week, with Keri, we've been explaining this for so long, but now all of a sudden, once the world has no choice but to watch George Floyd, then people are coming to us saying, how can we help? We're sorry we weren't paying attention. And it's the same cycle that keeps happening over and over again. And so I can understand on one hand how some people at Notre Dame's campus can't really trust Ndpd to protect them. So that's why they suffer in silence. And I know right now Ndpd is trying to build those relationships, but some people have already left, and they've already checked out. So I really do hope that going forward, that as Ndpd does build these relationships, that we listen more. Yeah, and I know it's going to take more than just one conversation to get things going the right direction, because it's not easy, because we're trying to undo a system that was not always built to protect us. We can go back from ages, and look at the history. We can go back to lynching and even describe how, a lot of times, a lot of our cases still are not accounted for. But the Black life has always been one of those things. It's always been seen as lesser than the white person. And to come to a campus to get your education, you are there because you earned the right to be there. And as you've earned the right to be there, you want to make sure that you are protected at all costs, that you are not seen as prey to the person who can kill you at any minute. Not saying that Ndpd would do that, but at this in 2020, the things that we said that people wouldn't do, they have been doing it. So, and I do understand at the end of the day, we are all people. Once you take off your badge and your uniform, you are still a person. And I just want us to understand that it hurts. It hurts at times, but yet it's those things where we're going to have to just continue to build trust.
Yeah, I completely agree that it is going to need to be an ongoing conversation, an ongoing effort to build trust, because even if we Ndpd never do anything to violate that trust, it's been violated by our industry. And so people come in expecting, knowing that we're a part of that system, and rightfully so, expecting us to treat them the way that they expect to be treated. And so, we talk about that while we try to be different, and while we're not perfect, but we try very hard to be different. We try very hard to build trust. Every 4 years, it's a completely different community of people coming in who bring with them whatever experiences, whatever beliefs they have, and it's our job to say, yes, we want to listen and acknowledge and understand what that experience is, and try to offer a different experience here. And try to build that relationship and that trust over and over and over again.
Chief Shibata, I appreciate you so much for having these conversations with me. They're very sticky at times, but it's okay. Sometimes we don't have all the answers right now, but the more we work together, the more that we can build those answers together. So I appreciate you for taking time out of your schedule to talk to me.
So I appreciate the invitation and the opportunity, and invite anyone who wants to engage in a conversation or share an experience, or certainly if there's a concern or a complaint, to reach out, invite us to events, and we'll be inviting people to, whether they're virtual or in person, to events to engage and build trust in community, because that's what we all need to be about.
Right. And so whenever you do have your event, make sure that you bring food, because students love food. Graduate students too. So, well, listen, everybody, we thank you so much for listening up to our conversation today. So make sure to follow us on social media, on Twitter, Black_@ND, Instagram, Black_@ND, and Facebook, Black@ND. So remember to wake up, listen up, and speak up.